The ospreys, people have even stopped counting them now. There's so many in the state of Maine. And that trend should continue. We should see more and more birds of prey coming back. The eagle population is growing at an extremely nice rate now, greater than 800 mating pairs in the state of Maine. And that's definitely on the rise.
Although Maine's bald eagle population has bounced back over the past decade, it is still considered to be in danger of extermination. The majority of the birds make their home in the northeastern coastal areas of Hancock and Washington counties. After being nearly destroyed by pesticides in the 1950s in Europe and most of the United States, the peregrine falcon has come back. A pair now nest on the cliffs of the Precipice Trail on Mount Desert Island. Another peregrine species, the eastern Anatum peregrine, was indigenous to Maine but disappeared over 50 years ago. The skies above Maine's 5,200 miles of coastline are the path of migration for thousands of species of raptors, seabirds, wading birds, shore, and songbirds. Only a few of them stay here during the winter months. The chickadee, appropriately designated the state bird, is one of only a few that thrive in a cold, sometimes harsh climate. There are more than 2,000 islands, most of them undeveloped, that provide the perfect nesting ground for the birds who spend most of their life at sea. Egg and chick-eating predators, as well as human encroachment, have made nesting on the mainland nearly impossible and have threatened the existence of one species, the roseate tern, now listed as endangered. For those birds who preferred to nest on the offshore islands, the early 1900s proved to be a difficult time. Puffins nest in rock crevices and terns nest on grassy knolls. When decorated hats became the rage in the 30s, these birds' feathers became valuable. The puffins and terns were hunted to near extinction. In the 80s and early 90s, several National Audubon Society projects relocated puffins from Newfoundland, Canada, to several islands off the coast of Maine. Today, their numbers are watched closely by researchers who camp on the islands in the summer to await the birds' return from sea.
There's three types of terns that nest on Petite Manane Island where we are today. Common terns have orange bills with a black tip and dark feathers on the tips of their wings. Arctic terns have shorter bills with a blood red bill. And the roseate tern, the federally endangered tern, has an all-black bill and is a lighter bird altogether. The Atlantic puffin nests on 5 islands in the Gulf of Maine. They aren't rare globally. There's hundreds of thousands in Newfoundland, but in the Gulf of Maine, it's hard to see puffins. Puffins prefer to nest in rocks, under crevices. In the Gulf of Maine, in Newfoundland, they burrow. They actually burrow into the sod. Whereas the terns will prefer to nest on top of the island in vegetation.
See, the problem with banning puffin chicks is like they have such little legs. Any younger and the band comes right off.
In the 1800s, seabirds were used for their eggs and their meat by fishermen. In the early 1900s, the plume hunters used birds for ladies' hats and other fashions. So they did have quite impact on birds, seabirds. As long as we protect the areas where they nest, then the puffins will also benefit. We don't necessarily have to gear our management and protection toward puffins, but if we use an umbrella approach and protect seabird nesting habitat, puffins will be protected.
Beyond the islands and deep into the Atlantic Ocean, 5 species of whales find refuge in Maine's deep, cold water. The right, humpback, finback, sperm, and sei whales migrate here to feed during the summer months. Although hunting no longer poses a threat to these mammals in the United States, whale populations continue to struggle. Many whales fall prey to fishing nets and traps each year. The effects of pesticides and other contaminants are still being studied. In Maine, many of the whale-watching craft for tourists also serve as research vessels.
What's important about this area for whales is food. The whales are hungry, they're big, and they're looking for a good, easy meal. There's a lot of fish out here, concentrated in a relatively small area, and it draws in quite a few different kinds of whales, including 3 endangered species, as well as some of the smaller dolphins and porpoises, and what they're coming here to do is to eat. Whales evolved from land animals, small, middle-sized animals that lived near the shore, probably fished a lot in shallow waters near shore. And as they spent more and more of their lives in the water, they became more and more adapted to life in the water, till eventually they didn't have to go back on shore at all for anything. The right whales were once hunted very heavily. They were considered the right whale to hunt, and they were reduced from very large numbers down to what we see today, and in spite of complete protection from hunting for about 50 years, they're still very, very endangered. The humpback whale is an endangered species that we see here. It was hunted very heavily by the large ocean-going whaling ships and reduced to a very small fraction of its original population size. It hasn't been hunted in recent times and may be making a bit of a recovery. They are one of the more abundant whales that we see here today. The finback whale is the second largest animal on Earth ever to have lived on Earth. They are an endangered species, and even though they're one of the most numerous whales sighted along the coast of Maine, we know very, very little about them, even something as simple as how many of them there are. We don't know as much about the fin whales for 2 reasons. One is because we haven't put a lot of resources into the study of them, and the other is because they're fairly elusive, fast-moving, and hard to study in the wild. Let's face it, these are inspiring animals. They're some of the largest animals that ever lived on Earth. They're endangered, some of them severely endangered. And we're extremely fortunate that they're here for us to study, for us to see on the Maine coast most any day in the summer.
To preserve what we have had the opportunity to experience, we must take with us nothing but the experience. As we've seen, man has already had a major impact on wildlife here. In order to secure the future of the wilderness and its species, we need to remain sensitive to the environment we share here in Maine. Production of Wild Maine is made possible in part by